Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back with more Pacific Islander and Asian Americans, notable names in history. I screwed up that intro, but that's okay. We're going to go with it. Anyway, today we are looking at Philip Vera Cruz. Since we did look at Leong, I figured we'd go with one of the men he worked with quite often in the fight for workers' rights, Philip Vera Cruz. Um, with that said, let's go ahead and get into this. This is from his alma mater, Gonzaga. Um, they say there is a bench in Bulldog Alley which runs east to west south of College Hall that serves to remember and honor the life of Philip Vera Cruz, an influential Filipino American leader in the organized labor movement, a civil rights activist, a founding member and vice president of the United Farm Workers Union, and former Gonzaga University student. Of course, Bulldog Alley is a reference to their mascot, the Gonzaga University Bulldogs. So, yeah. So, it's talking about a bench on campus that remembers and honors who Philip Vera Cruz is. So, through his decades of working low-wage jobs, Vera Cruz developed a philosophy that put people, especially the most marginalized, first. He believed that everyone deserved opportunities and believed that workers needed to see each other as allies, not rivals. Also, Vera Cruz believed all workers needed labor unions because no one else would advocate as effectively for them. His collaboration with other communities serves as a beacon for future generations striving for a more equitable world. Born in 1904 in San Juan, Ilocos Sur Province, Philippine Islands, Vera Cruz spent his youth tending to water buffalo on his family farm and attended American colonial schools in the Philippines, and he dreamed of getting a college degree in the U.S., and so he would immigrate to Seattle, Washington in 1926, which would put him at what, 24? 22. Yeah, 22 years of age. 21, 22, somewhere in there. But yeah. And remember, at this point, Philippines was a territory of the U.S. So, he worked a variety of low-wage jobs throughout the Pacific Coast states to pay for tuition. He enrolled at Gonzaga University in the fall of 1931, and as much of Vera Cruz's income was sent back to support his family in the Philippines, he was unable to pay his tuition and withdrew from school after 1 year. He continued doing so many different jobs in hospitality, farm labor, and salmon canning, meeting working class Americans everywhere inspired him to join labor unions. He became a labor rights activist because he and other Filipino Americans, Leong would probably be the biggest name with them, struggled to survive on farm labor wages. They went on strike in 1965. Vera Cruz became an active leader in the labor rights movement, joining Mexican American, Black American, and Filipino American farm workers, and he would co-found the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, AWOC, a predominantly Filipino labor organization headquartered in California's Central Valley. On September 8, 1965, more than 800 Filipino American farm workers, members of AWOC, walked out on strike against Delano area table and wine grape growers. They protested years of poor pay and conditions. During the grape strike, farm workers demanded that grape growers pay their workers wages equal to the federal minimum wage, calling for an increase in their hourly wages from $125 per hour to $140. Farm workers merited the increase because the grape industry was booming and they continued to meet the demanding labor needs of grape growers. Vera Cruz explained in his personal history that the Filipino laborers' strong labor consciousness was due to decades spent laboring in the U.S. and because we listened to market reports on the radio and discussed those reports in Ilocano, our dialect. The success of the 5-year grape strike relied on the solidarity built between Filipino and Mexican American farm workers. For the 1965 strike to be successful, Filipino and Mexican farm workers needed to work together. If Mexican Americans didn't support the strike, growers would bring them in as scabs to replace Filipinos and break the strike. Larry Leong, a Filipino farm worker and member of AWOC, reached out to Mexican American farm labor leaders Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, co-founders of the National Farm Workers Association, and asked them to join the Filipino strike. The Filipino-American AWOC and Mexican-American NFWA joined together and became the United Farm Workers Union, the UFW. The Delano grape strike grew to include 10,000 workers. Their numbers fluctuated, but they struggled, picketed, and demonstrated for 5 long years. By 1970, the grape strike was a complete success. At long last, Delano's table grape growers signed their first labor union contracts, guaranteeing workers better pay, benefits, access to drinking water and restroom facilities in the fields, and safety protections from pesticides. The strike helped and inspired farm workers not only in California but throughout the U.S. Thus, Philip Vera Cruz's leadership in the 1965 Delano grape workers strike helped set the stage for the founding of the UFW in 1967. Vera Cruz served as its first vice president for 12 years. During this time, his compassion for the farm worker and the Filipino community shone. As a fierce advocate and dynamic speaker, he ensured communication with the union's members. The UFW is the largest and longest-lasting farm labor union in the U.S. The UFW has many unique contracts and protects thousands of farm workers and has also sponsored laws and regulations that protect all farm workers in California, including those at non-union ranches. Vera Cruz also played a key role in forming both a farm workers credit union and Delano's Agbayani Village retirement community for aging Filipino farm workers. Vera Cruz resigned from the UFW in 1977 but remained active in labor and social justice issues until his death in 1994 at the age of 89. During his career in organized labor, he worked to shed light on the plight of migrant farm workers, advocating for safe working conditions, better salaries, medical care, and retirement funds. And his life illustrates how we can work to create a world of collective liberation through cross-cultural solidarity. They talk about the memorial project. Okay, but anyway, that was from Gonzaga University. This is from the National Park Service. Philip Vera Cruz. He was a Filipino-American labor organizer, farm worker, and leader of the Asian American and Civil Rights Movement. He played a central role in the founding of the UFW and is the best known for his role in the Delano farm workers' strike and boycott, and his leadership in the UFW, where he served as the second vice president. Gonzaga said he served as the first. No, just said he served as a vice president. So he was second vice president. Okay. While he emerged as a prominent leader within the farm worker movement, his story and experience reflect the greater challenges of the Manong generation, one of the first waves of Filipino migrant workers who came to the United States in the 1920s and 1930s. And of course, we know Itliong was Manong as well. It is a term of affection and respect, best translated as older male relative or older brother. Vera Cruz's life and legacy offers a look into Filipino-American labor history, transnational politics, and community activism. He was born December 25th, 1905, Christmas Day, okay, in the Philippine province of Ilocos Sur, then a U.S. territory. He was the oldest child to his parents, Adriano Sanchez Vera Cruz and Maria Villaman of Sawang, San Juan. He had two siblings, Martin and Leonor. He spent his childhood tending to water buffalo on his family's farm, and as a teenager traveled to Lingayen for school, where he learned from American teachers. At the age of 20, he embarked on the steamship Empress of Asia out of Manila, capital of the Philippines, to the United States. He entered the continental U.S. through Seattle, Washington in 1926. He reminisces in his oral history. I kept reminding myself of my goal for going to America to study, to get a job, save money, and return to help my family. From the beginning of his U.S. colonial period in 1898, of the U.S. colonial period, 1898 to 1934, Filipinos were technically non-citizen U.S. nationals who were permitted to enter and move around the country. Early Filipino immigrants, mostly single men, left their homeland to seek out better opportunities in the job market and educational system. Their relocation was not meant to be permanent. Rather, many Filipino immigrants wanted to return to the Philippines after making some money for their families and gaining educational and work experience. Vera Cruz, along with other Filipinos, arrived right before the economic shock of the Great Depression. Instead of better opportunities, they faced racial discrimination, oppressive labor practices, anti miscegenation laws, and deplorable living conditions. Anti miscegenation laws, which we've spoken of before, in California prevented Filipinos from marrying white women. Other legislative restrictions prevented many Filipino men from forming families in the United States. In 1934, the Tidings-McDuffie Act, also known as the Philippine Independence Act, restricted immigration from the Philippines and set the foundation for a 10-year transition to Philippine national independence from the U.S. Consequently, Filipinos were then reclassified as aliens. This act cut off over 100,000 migrant Filipino workers from Filipino women of their generation. Thus, many Manongs spent years as laborers and without families into their old age. Finding work was also a challenge. He, like many other Filipinos, followed the seasons and worked a variety of low-wage jobs, from working as an Alaskan in an Alaskan cannery, a box factory in Cosmopolis, Washington, a North Dakota farm, a country club in Spokane, Washington, and restaurants across Washington to Chicago, Illinois. He worked as a houseboy for a few families where he cleaned homes and property, yet the pay was meager and required constant relocation. Like many Filipinos, he sent a majority of his earnings back to his family in the Philippines as remittance. In 1931, he studied briefly at Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington, but was unable to sustain his studies while working full-time. His formal education would end there, and would focus his efforts earning money as a laborer. During August 1942, amidst World War II, he was drafted to the U.S. Army and was sent to San Luis Obispo, California for basic training. He was assigned to the 2nd Filipino Infantry Regiment at Camp Cook, a segregated U.S. Army infantry regiment consisting of Filipino Americans living in the continental U.S. He would be discharged due to his age, as he was over 38 years old, and then joined the migration of Filipinos discharged from service, and was assigned to work at farms, steel factories, and other defense industries for the war effort. He settled in Delano, Central Valley, California, where he eventually bought his own property in Rich Grove, Delano, and emerged as a labor organizer. 1948, along with Larry Itliong and other labor leaders, Vera Cruz participated in the asparagus strike in Stockton, California. It was the first major U.S. agricultural strike after World War II, and in the late 50s, Vera Cruz joined the National Farm Labor Union, NFLU, which was part of the AFL-CIO. Here he helped organize farm workers in Delano and worked mainly with Filipino workers as well as Mexican and Black American farm workers. Although he was president of the NFLU for a time, he stepped away from labor organizing, and in the mid-60s was approached by a neighbor to join the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, or AWOC, which was mainly Filipino farm workers and required $2 union membership dues. He recounts that the $2 I paid for membership was probably the most important and expensive $2 I spent in my life. Because remember, they were fighting for $1.40 or something like that an hour. So yeah. He paid his union dues right before the momentous September 8th, 1965 AWOC mass meeting at the Filipino Community Hall in Delano. On the day the Filipino farm workers of the AWOC voted to strike against grape growers in and around Delano, California. And the Delano Manongs striked for better salaries, decent medical care, retirement funds, and safe working conditions. The decision set the stage for a national farm workers movement lasting 5 years. And would establish Vera Cruz's career as a national labor leader. The grape growers could easily replace the striking workers, and such a strike would require support of Mexican farm workers, many of whom were part of the NFWA, National Farm Workers Association, which is organized by Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. Larry Itliong, a Filipino farm worker organizer with AWOC, convinced Chavez and the NFWA to join forces with AWOC. Together, AWOC and NFWA coordinated the national Delano Farm Workers 1965 to 1966 grape strike and boycott. They would later merge to become the United Farm Workers, UFW, in 1967 and began a decade of strikes and other actions, shedding light on the plight of farm workers. Vera Cruz would serve as the UFW's vice president for 12 years and worked closely with the Filipino laborers in Delano, ensuring that the Filipinos were informed about union actions, demonstrations, and meetings. Within the UFW, he emerged as a strong public speaker and had a gift for rallying the masses through his speeches. Filipinos in the U.S. have long engaged with the struggles of their homeland, and many Filipino farm workers had families left in the Philippines who they supported financially, and thus the issues of the Philippines affected those working abroad, such as Vera Cruz. As time progressed, the Filipino farm workers became the minority within the UFW, and Vera Cruz vocally expressed that Filipinos were not properly recognized for their role in the farm workers movement. In addition, Filipinos' concerns were not being taken into account by the UFW leadership. One such issue regarded the UFW's stance on Philippine martial law. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Sr. enacted martial law on September 23, 1972, and martial law meant that the military has control over the government, and activities such as mass mobilizations and organizing were prohibited. A curfew was put into place, and civil and political rights were suspended. Many Filipino community organizers, journalists, students, and outspoken critics were arrested, jailed, and killed without due process under the law. This would last almost 14 years until President Marcos Sr. was ousted from office during the 1986 People Power Revolt. Public opinion regarding martial law was polarized in the Philippines and overseas. Both pro and anti-Marcos opinions, as well as apathy, were prevalent in Delano, California, among the Filipino community, but Vera Cruz vocally spoke out against Marcos Sr. and Philippine martial law. In 1977, Cesar Chavez was invited by President Marcos Sr. to the Philippines to receive an award for improving the conditions of Filipino migrant workers in California through the UFW. Vera Cruz, as a board member officer, shared his dissenting opinion regarding the visit and cited the oppression and arrest of Philippine labor leaders and the prohibition of all strikes under Marcos Sr.'s administration. But Chavez still chose to travel to the Philippines as a guest of President Marcos Sr., losing the trust of many Filipino workers in the UFW. And Philip Vera Cruz chose to resign from the UFW, describing Chavez's decision as the final blow. While still in the UFW, Vera Cruz helped construct the UFW's retirement village for aging Filipino workers, the Palo Agbayani Retirement Village in Delano, California. Its name honoring a Filipino farm worker who died on a Union picket line in 1967. Agbayani Village opened its doors in 1974. After the UFW, Vera Cruz continued to share his experiences and insights among youth students, labor organizations, and community groups, and spent his later years fostering Filipino American youth's interest and political consciousness. In his oral history, he emphasizes the importance of getting involved in community activism. If somebody is moved by this story to do something to help others, to make a sacrifice, to use their intellect for good of the people, not only to make this only people in this country who will be affected, but also those in the Philippines. If more young people could just get involved in the important issues of social justice, they would form a golden foundation for the struggle of all people to improve their lives. In 1987, Vera Cruz received the Ninoy M. Aquino Award in the Philippines. He traveled to his homeland for the first time since immigrating in 1926 and reunited with his family after 60 years abroad. He would die on June the 11th, 1994, at the age of 89, and would be laid to rest in Hillcrest Memorial Park in Bakersfield, California. So yeah. Now let's look at Wikipedia, see what they have to say. A lot of the same things. Mostly looks like and briefly a member of the Industrial Workers of the World, IWW. Gonzaga, the Army, the Delano strike, UFW, leaving, in 1992, the AFL-CIO's Asia Pacific American Labor Committee honored Vera Cruz at its founding convention. In 1995, a year after his death, the first mural honoring Vera Cruz and other Filipino-American farm workers was completed in Los Angeles' historic Filipino town. In 2013, the New Haven Unified School District renamed Alvarado Middle School as Leong Vera Cruz Middle School in honor of Vera Cruz and Larry Leong, and is the first school in the U.S. to be named after Filipino Americans. So yeah, a look at Philip Vera Cruz. Woo! But we'll go ahead and end this here. As always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll be putting my links and sources in the description box below the video. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.